Hey, good morning, Dinkar. Hi, Anumeha.
Hi,
And
nice to
as
meet
you
you.
folks can see, there is a third person here, and that's Anumeha. Hi, Anumeha. A few words about you. Who are you? Why are you here? What's happening?
Um, well, you already said my name is Anumeha. Um, I've been in the IT industry for about 15 years or so. A major part of that has been with ThoughtWorks in business and product roles. So I've done a lot of that in the past few years. I've spent a lot of time on data projects within ThoughtWorks, but on the functional business side of data projects, um, which is more focused on how people use data, how businesses use data at scale, and what we can get out of that. So that data product intersection is of a lot of interest for me. I think it's a lot of fun. Also, a lot of untapped potential in there. So that's
Yeah.
what. The other day, Dinkar and I ran into each other in office, and he was like, "Hey, why are you doing product for data?" And I was like, "Because data needs it." And so one thing led to the other, and we said, "Okay, this looks like an interesting conversation. We should chat more." And that's why I'm here.
Absolutely. So we talk a lot about we have talked a lot about product management, but mostly in application development space. We have talked a lot about generative AI and how product managers can benefit from generative AI as a tool. We haven't talked much about product management in the times of generative AI, and that is what we wanted to hear from you. So over to you. Can you maybe just quickly start with the most basic of a question that I'm very curious to hear about? What does the product life cycle look like for a product which is based on generative AI, or as you may say, a data related, data based product, if
Mhm.
that's the right answer?
Sure. I'll start with a simple example that maybe all of us would be aware of, right? A lot of, and you'll see the interesting part of this is we all use data products. They are in our everyday lives. A lot of people are building data products, yet it's not out there specifically called out as a data product for whatever reasons. Like take Google Maps for an example, through and through a data product. The purpose of Google Maps is actually help you navigate. So whether you are looking for a point on the map or whether you are looking to get from point A to point B, the navigation bit, that's what it is about. And it's got a lot of data in there for those locations, for those points. And then it's got intelligence built on top of it. So if you want to go from point A to point B, it will use the data to say, okay, these are your three options. This is the time they will take. This is how the traffic will look like. This is how maybe sometimes the tolls will look like. So it gives you all of that information, so you can make a decision which one you want to take. Most of the times, it also makes the decision for you. So it uses the data to tell you. We assume you want the fastest route, so this is the one you should take, and so it puts you on that default. And if you put that in light of the product life cycle, then Google Maps have been around, I don't know, forever, is what I recall. But again, a long, long time, right? And a lot of data products, if they keep on building that intelligence, so you build a base layer with data and then you keep adding on features which you can derive from the data. And so they can go on for a long time. The life cycle stages themselves don't differ a lot from any other product, I would say. And you typically get into the build and run and keep enhancing that cycle. So that's where it is.
So, Anumeha, for the we have a very different set of audience, and not may everybody will be at the same page. So, one clarification is, if you can like go a little bit deeper on
Hmm.
if since like inception of our business applications, like right
Right.
from the IBM days, right,
Yeah.
we used to only do two things. When there were no UX as well, it was all about you have data which you are churning, whether it is business data or whether it is spreadsheet or whether it is text data, and then you used to apply some business logic, and then you used to transform that data to give you out some decisions, information, report,
Yeah.
presentation.
Yeah.
Now, in that sense, everything which we output onto the screen or write to a file or deliver it over the internet is data. Not everything is data product though. The way even in Google Maps example which you took, not everything what Google Maps does is a data product. Whereas there are certain things which are succinctly data product, and some other things are just like pure, like by the definition of like everything would be a data product. Even if I put a text block and label on top of it, it would be a data product. But it is not, at least to my mind. So how would you distinguish between a data product and non-data product? Just plain data, basically.
So that's an excellent question, by the way. Data products are essentially products whose USP depends on data, in which sense Google Maps becomes a data product, but not everything might be, right? So anything that is using a lot of data to make a decision is a data product. There's another part which has taken center stage after data mesh came around. So one of the basic principles of mesh is that you should also look at your data as a product. So apply product thinking to data. And there's a quote by Jamak which I really like, where she says, hey, data is not an asset to hold, but it's actually a product to develop and to share with other people. So how do you think about, and like you said in the earlier days, right, everybody was generating all sorts of data, and a lot of times we were just generating data for the sake of generating data and keeping it because someday we'll use it. But the shift in mindset in the past few years has been, who is this other person using data and what do they want from it? And how do we design those data products in a way that it helps them instead?
Right.
So it's a 180-degree turn where we are going to the other side and saying, let's do it based on what the users need, not based on what we can give them.
One thing, actually, I'm jumping quite steps in a product lifecycle, but this is really jumping in my head is uh, how do you QA these products? I mean, having if you're QAing a data product, that means you need data, you need the
Yeah.
abundance of it, you need the variety, so on and so forth, right? So
Yeah.
that would lead to some kind of cash flow. Like, how do you typically do that? How are you folks handling the scenario?
So quality checks and testing QA for data products is actually very interesting. Not because that we don't have so much data all the time, but the whole process itself requires a lot of shifts as well. So if let's say we take another business application, you have a typical a typical QA process. You have the testing pyramid and you base it on that. Data products do something similar, but the key part where you said about, you need the data to test it. So there's the whole process of testing a product through its life cycle, and then there is like a last mile testing as well, where you want to make sure you have done all the quality checks and that this product is good to go out. While you're testing during the stages, you would sometimes create synthetic data, or fake data or test data is also what it's known as. And what our testing teams used to do, they would look at what the layout of that data product is, what kind of data it may need, and then they would create a lot of test data, a lot of times on spreadsheets, and then they would plug it into their testing systems. What it required for them to do is have a really good understanding of the product, yes, but also put in all sorts of scenarios in creating that test data. So let's say if we are talking about, name as one of the data points, and names could be written in so many different ways, like you see on this podcast, the three of us, I am just going with my first name. Sachin has shortened his last name, and then you have put in your full name, right? So our testers would not only have to think of those scenarios, they would also have to put all that data in, um, which was time taking. The interesting shift that's come with a lot of these LLM tools now is actually we can create synthetic data like this. Like I did it in one of my recent projects where we were like, okay, this is what we know about the business, like largely a manufacturing company, this is what they manufacture, these sort of customers that they have, this sort of sales and marketing data that we want. And so we plugged in those details into ChatGPT the other day and said, hey, ChatGPT, can you give us some synthetic data to say what this looks like? Now, by all means, we were not, doing this, like giving real customer data into ChatGPT, but just asking it to create fake data for us, which it was really, really good at. Like what used to take us days actually took minutes.
Actually, I had a very good, very interesting experience here. And Anumeha, like we go on these digressions a lot. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Perfectly fine.
So, at some point, I was working for a banking application where we needed client PII, right? And finding synthetic data was a big expense on that organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they used to take product data, go through lots of anonymization. Then there used to
Yeah.
be a legal team which used to actually, eyeball review it. A lot of project it takes a lot of time, and hence it's a big expense. And one
Yep.
of the things that always was in our mind was that this is one of the consulting asset we should make, which generates this kind of data. And I was
Mm-hmm.
struggling with synthetic data. And I'll let Sachin talk about it. He had some insights on how to make it. But one thing I tried with generative AI is, can you make a table with name, address, and country, and it generated some 20, 30 names. Then as I started adding more parameters like phone number, and at some point it stopped responding. It says the data being generated is very close to being used as real data, and we are
Mm.
stopping. I'm no longer generating it for you. That becomes a very interesting, because few years back there's also this story that there was this startup founder who actually sold the startup to JP Morgan, said we have millions of users, all the data, even those people got cheated. They all was generated data. So that was a very interesting. And one of the things that we struggled with, and that's why I asked you about this QA, was that synthetic data tends to be very good data. Production data will always have some, data corruption, data format mismatches, and all that, and that becomes very difficult. But Sachin
Yeah.
had some interesting. So, Sachin, do you want to talk a bit
Yeah,
about
yeah.
that too?
I mean, the GPT actually has a lot of potential to be the driver for uh, generative, like synthetic data, right? But in my understanding, there were some issues which we could not overcome with GPT. GPT also, if you think about it, right, it lowered the barrier of it brought a lot of complex problem in our reach quickly. But then it is also creating that illusion that it is now simple, which is not. Example would be is writing poem became very simple, but writing a good poem which will touch millions of hearts, it's still extremely difficult. But now it's like difference between like YouTube. What it did, it democratized video making. Anybody can actually put up a nice video of 20 minutes, like and it doesn't but we are doing podcast. Think of the whole idea of it is challenging the movie medium, challenging the ad medium, challenging the medium which is established, which requires a lot of effort, cost. Earlier people couldn't buy re 3 camera system with $50,000 each lens and a microphone setup which is just like $10,000 microphone and then $25,000 amplifier and all that stuff. We couldn't just buy that; it was out of reach. But then when you brought cost of creation down, it gets democratized and everybody can do that. But that does not mean essentially you you make it better. You just get a lot of information and everybody get a chance to say. So there is a value in doing that, and it is absolutely amazing. But yet the quality remains a challenge. Yeah, yesterday went to watch a very typical Bollywood movie, very masala movie, Rocky Rani ki love story or something like that. The whole experience of sitting in that theater and watching that movie was so phenomenal. It is nothing to take home, but I enjoyed that 3 hours like hard out. I was laughing. That whole production value was amazing. The clothing and it shows that, right? No matter what I do, I know that any influencer, which is even making $1 million every year, they would not be able to make a video like that. And that is that is something which is really different. Chat GPT, I feel it is analogous to that. Although it can generate a lot of data very quickly, I find it has some challenges, right? Number one, it keeps forgetting what it generated, let's say 10 pages ago. So
Mhm.
you have a tendency to create repetitive data. It may suggest something. It also hallucinates and creates data. Luckily for synthetic data generation, hallucination is not a bad quality. But at the same time, the thing is, you may end up having data which is too real when it is not real. And the third thing is, if you look at it closely, depending upon what day and where ChatGPT has woken up, your same prompt starts giving slightly different output. So let's say that one prompt actually gave a table with these headers and everything. 15 minutes down the line, you may get very different. It is not deterministic output at all. So if you have been like relying downstream systems of generating 20 rows in a certain fashion, you may get actually slightly different output. And these all are programming challenges which will eventually get addressed and sorted out. In true sense, like mathematically, if you want to generate synthetic data, there are algorithms and methods which mathematically prove this is unique data. This is not based on original data. There are some variations which we have introduced. There is a noise injected into all of that, and GPT just goes, and it is like difference between what Karan Johar's movie is of that mathematically proven versus ChatGPT, which is like, okay, I just held up my phone camera and made a video. So it's just like ultimately, if I do comparison 1:1, it's a video, it's a script. There are two actors talking about it, but it is not a movie, and that's, I would say, is a challenge which industry needs to overcome with, because there will be a lot of people who will immaturely challenge that, hey, I have done this can be done using generative AI fast enough, but I worry whether that is going to be real enough, because now you have two QA responsibilities. The data which you are generating using ChatGPT, that needs to be QA'd, and the QA of actual QA which you do on your system as well, which is data product generation. So I don't know whether we are solving the problem or we are making our life complex.
What both of you just said is actually how product management might look like in the age of generative AI.
Correct.
So let's pick up things, right? One thing that the recent GenAI tools have made very, very easy is the experimentation. So they've made the whole process of experimenting and testing very easy. They've also lowered the cost barrier. Like earlier, we used
Yes.
to worry about what that experiment will cost, right? So as product managers or as product teams, how do we capitalize on that? How do we test out our ideas really fast? How do we get that validation before failing in the market and incurring a high cost there? That's one part. The other part, which you've called out, is how do we have almost enterprise grade generative AI tools, right? Which we can actually trust and take. And that there's a lot of work going on, and it will take time, but I think we'll get there. It's going through the usual technology cycles, right? We have seen a lot of hype, we have seen initial adoption. Now this needs to turn into enterprise grade AI. The other thing which has been happening in the data world for quite some time is a lot of AI tools. So even if you leave GenAI aside, a lot of AI techniques have been applied to a lot of products. And this is where I think the product management in the data space differs a little bit from other business applications, is that you start at times taking a solution and looking for a problem that can be solved with it, over taking a problem and saying, okay, how do we solve this problem? Should we build a product about this? Are there products out there which can solve it? How do we integrate them into our current ecosystem? A lot of that thinking starts to shift around. Here is a solution. A lot of technological development is already happening with it. And so it's quite likely that it looks like X right now, but it will look like Y in 2 months. So how do we think about all of that and put that in the current context to say, okay, how do we solve this problem with this solution? How might we solve it in the next 6 months? And that's a shift that I think as product managers, we need to get, ahead of.
Correct.
Sounds fair, right? I mean, it goes through the cycle. You have a technology, and then, hey, what can I do with this technology? And at some point, a problem matures enough. You say, now that I understand this problem, what are the better ways or different technologies, or even some low tech version I can look for. So, Anumeha, I
But
had one
Dinkar,
more question. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Dinkar, I wanted to also add one more thing to the product manager's thing, right? Is and I'll get back to your question, but it is related to what she was saying. In the world of any product management, right? We think about user experience is very critical. So if we are building something, we want the maximum acceptance. Like people should feel that okay, I can use maximum of what the creator intended. So Uber would like to say that I need to create only 10 screens or 4 screens, but in 4 screens I want them to book a cab and like know exactly what is coming to them. Amazon also creates that single click. So the goal of creators of products and product managers in turn is to make sure that people take that thing in the shortest amount of time. That is number one. Gen AI, in my mind, has a lot to offer in this thing without taking a lot of risks. Example would be is its ability to comprehend something. Whatever is presented on the screen is insane. And often when I see charts, data, tabular structures, anything, and couple of times people have done this to me, is like they said, "Have you seen this table? Isn't it surprising to you?" And my first reaction is like, I don't want to sound dumb, and I don't want to sound like an idiot, but I'm just like frantically searching what is it that's so surprising in this table. So that is something which always bothers me, right? And people put other people on spot for such kind of things. And but generative AI, I have seen few demos, few examples. ThoughtSpot has one offering in that sense, I guess, is
Yeah.
ability to comprehend data which is available on the table, available on the screen, interpret chart, create linkages, like draw insights. Do you think those are now reliable enough that it increases the efficacy of your data products so that consumption is easier, or it is still a little bit immature and we can't go and rely on that?
Based on my experience, I would still put it in that same category to say it's really good to give you a head start, but I wouldn't rely on it 100% to say, okay, this is good to go,
I
um,
see.
based on what it's generating, right? So yeah, that's where I would
But
be
the
with.
reliability counter is much higher, Anumeha, you feel, right?
Yeah, yeah, I do feel so because so again, coming from like a consulting background, we do want to make sure that what we are putting in front of our customers is 100% reliable or decently reliable, right? And unless we can be sure of that with our testing and processes and everything, how do we do that? And I think that's still missing. We might get there soon, but at the moment, that is still missing.
I think one good thing has happened is that everyone across the whole industry understands that these tools are producing very good drafts. Tools
Yeah,
are creating very good version 0.5,
yeah,
but don't expect them to generate your version 1, which you can take out. And that's as of today, we don't know what's coming soon.
yeah,
The other question that I had, Anume, on the jumping little ahead again on the product life cycle, is around the regulations, compliance, approvals, right? One of the biggest thing that neural network or these kind of things we're finding very difficult in past for getting regulatory approval was that regulators want to know that if I give these 5 inputs, I will get this output because, and there is a table, there's a relationship, that right. And they get very uncomfortable when you say that, hey, this is a neural network, it's a black box, we don't know what's inside it, somehow it will spit an answer. And for example, if you are applying for a loan and it says no, why did it say no, what were the criteria, right? And that has been a very big hurdle, so as to say, for adoption of these AI technologies in a lot of enterprises. As a product manager in this area, right? How do you see this? Do you still see that we are a little behind on that? It will take some time, or do you think do you feel things are changing, or do you feel as a product manager there are things you can do that can give more comfort to the regulators that this is more predictable, this is more deterministic, there is a logic behind it, and it's not just some fuzzy intelligence somewhere spitting out something.
yeah. Interestingly, that word deterministic, right? That will almost always be there, and how you deal with it. I think what's important is rather than thinking about how deterministic the output can be, we think about how deterministic the process can be, because that's what we can control. And there are multiple aspects of regulations in the space, right? So a very important aspect is about the data protection and privacy, which
Hmm.
has seen a lot of regulation in the past, and for good reason, right? Like because we have so much data, how are we using that data? Are we using it in an ethical way? Is also very, very critical. And that's where, GDPR came in, and a lot of other laws have come in many, many regions. And that's one part that as product managers, we can definitely, make it easier for the regulators. So making sure that you have all that covered, and that's almost like the source of any data product, whether you use AI, gen AI, or whatever. That's where your source is. So if you address that, anything you build on top of it is going to be more reliable. I would also say maybe safer in terms of how you're dealing with individuals sensitive data. So that's the critical part, and we can do. Coming to neural networks and gen AI in general, so regulations will definitely catch up, although I do think they will take some time. As product managers, what we could do is look at what you're going to do with that output. So even
Hmm.
if you get an output of a neural net, can you give this person a loan or not, right?
Hmm.
How is that going to get used? What's going to be the entire customer experience around it? What's going to be the decision around it, the story around it? That's where product managers can focus on, because that's what we do, right? For any other application. So do the same for your data products and go from there to say, okay, whether you can rely on this output or not, what more do you need to build in to rely on it?
Sounds good. Yeah, that's actually a very good insight. As a product manager, sometimes the whole stress around building something kind of overtakes the focus that we should have on someone using something. How will the operations use it?
Hmm.
How will they benefit from it? And what kind of things they should think about while using it? This is not the final wisdom, and it's true for everything, right? It's true for any kind of product that many times Google Map will say don't blindly follow, look at the road also. I want to tell a
Yeah.
very good fun story here. I was driving to Gokarna, and we chose a scenic looking route on the Google Map, and there was a nice bridge, and the bridge accesses a nice long island kind of thing, and then it takes us to Gokarna. So we started doing that, and it turned out that the bridge was actually a very narrow bridge for motorcycles and cycles. So
Oh.
I'm sitting in my Tata, and I'm looking here, and the people looking at me, where are you going, right? So yeah, products do give us information, but the users of the product have to apply some thought process. And I really found that insight very useful. That yeah, the product may say give loan or don't give loan, but the people who are using it underneath also need to put in their own checks and operational flows there. This was great. I think this was very useful and educating, and maybe at some point we can gather again and pick up this topic again. But I do want to call out one thing. Usually, I used to introduce Sachin as a technologist, which I think he is still one, but recently his official role has changed into that of a product manager. So I'm very
Ooh.
proud that I have dragged one more onto this side, and it's been one of my missions to capture each of the smartest people in other areas and bring them over to product managers. So one down,
I'm just
many more.
following great people's footsteps, Dinkar. You were a tech first and then went to
Sure,
product. So I'm just doing
sure, sure, sure.
More
Thanks a
often.
lot, Anumeha. Yeah,
Thank you so much, Anumeha.
Thank you. This was very interesting for me as well. Thanks for having me.
yeah.
Absolutely. Pleasure.
Take care,
Bye.
folks. Bye bye.